Hello, thank you for attending. We are going to go over the War of 1812 assignment. This one is more conventional, whereby I simply ask you to watch the PBS video on the War of 1812 and answer the questions that I have for you. All right, so this one is not an argumentative format like usual. All right, so I believe there, if on the Civil War, fighting the Civil War, I asked you to do some research um, instead of looking at something argumentative. And so I think these and the Constitution, as you may recall, I asked you to put it into three categories. Those are the three exceptions, okay, to the this type of to the format of assignments. All right. So I only do this once for a reason. I'm not very proud of it, but I couldn't think of a lot of arguments to that are prevalent in discourse about the War of 1812. It's kind of straightforward. There's not a lot of good discourse out there, a good dialogue, good debate. Okay. And so I apologize. It's kind of lower level learning. You're just extracting from the video and giving answers. Yes, Clara.
I haven't seen the constitutional assignment. Like, I'm not sure if that was posted or not, but I haven't seen it on Canvas.
Oh no, shoot. All right. Thank you for bringing that to my attention, hon. All right. All right. That's not good. All right. What I will do, if we somehow avoided that, I'm going to give the assignment because that's a big one. I don't want you to have missed that, but I'm going to give you a long time. I hope you notice that every time I make a mistake, I try to compensate by giving you extra time on something because I don't want you to be I don't want you to suffer for my mistake. So as a case in point, this assignment, I just posted this assignment and it's Thursday, and you had Monday technically to Sunday, and then it's beyond half the week before I finally put the War of 1812 up. So what I'm going to ask of you is that you have until not this Sunday night, but the following Sunday night to turn in this War of 1812 assignment. So I will do something likewise with the Constitution if I somehow didn't do that. What the case with the Constitution, other cases like this particular War of 1812 assignment, I flake out. I have multiple classes at multiple schools, and I could have sworn I put it on this class or that class, and I was mistaken. I confused it with another class. But with the Constitution, I may have omitted it because I omitted it on the syllabus. And I went off the syllabus, and I don't know what I was thinking because I want you to do that one. So, but you could rest assured that if the class has not done the Constitution assignment, I will not only talk about it in a Zoom, but I'm going to give you ample time to do it. Okay. So thank you for bringing that to my attention, Clara.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. No problem at all. And I'll also will give an announcement. I'll give an announcement to tell everybody, those who aren't able to make it to the Zoom, uh, keep them apprised of what's going on. Okay. Any other questions before we begin? All right. I'm going to share the screen with the assignment. Okay. So very upfront, like I said, lower level learning. Okay. That's why I only do this once in the semester. Who did the US fight in the War of 1812? How is Canada connected to the story? What reason or two is given for poor American military prowess? How does William Harrison play the villain in the narrative? What were the two official reasons for which the US declared war? How is Tecumseh portrayed in the video? An example or two, please. How did Detroit earn a negative story in the history book? What is the story of the Star Spangled Banner? What is significant role? What is significant role what significant role did Oliver Hazard Perry play? Okay. And then how is the Battle of New Orleans depicted? So those are the questions. All right. I have the URL for it right here. But also, like I said, if you were to go to YouTube and simply put in PBS video War of 1812, you'll get it. Okay. So as you go to it, let's see just some of the basics that I want to kind of give as far as context to that video. All right. Where to begin? I'll begin with the Native Americans. With the United States, right? The original states came from the original colonies, which were located on the East Coast, the Atlantic coast, right? And the Ohio Valley, present day Wisconsin, Minnesota, Indiana, Illinois, and Ohio, all around the Great Lakes, okay, up at the top, touching Canada. That area was claimed because we claimed it from England at the end of the War for Independence. All right. But England did not leave all the forts that were in that territory, somewhat defiantly, somewhat in just kind of lazy fashion. And so then you had at least 24, more than that, tribes that were in that area. And then you had the contention that the English had granted most of that territory to the Iroquois as conquered territory. So they're all stating their claim, right? And you had some enclaves of French, since they'd established Detroit and certain areas in Milwaukee, etc. And so it was a mixed lot. It was pretty ambiguous. So what we did is we declared it to be under the Articles of Confederation, actually, our first failed government, right? We contended that it was organized territory, and it needed to go through a meticulous process before they could carve future states that would eventually be annexed into the country, into the republic, right? And those are known as the Northwest Ordinances that they claimed them in. So at any rate, the first few presidents, what they did is they put a military governor over that region to keep law and order. Now remember, the Constitution guarantees a Republican form of government in every state, right? But not territory. It mentions nothing about a territory. So this won't be the only time in which we purchase or grab territory, and we do not allow anything approximating democratic or representative government for a while it's in territorial status. And this was no exception. So the military governors came in, and they also came in because there had been a couple very big uprisings from the Native Americans, trying to kick all of the, quote, paleface, all the white men out. And that meant the French, the British, and of course the Americans. Okay. And so, like if you wanted to look into a couple of those uprisings, you have a guy named Pontiac, like the car, and then you have also Little Turtle. Okay. So at any rate, sorry, I'm getting another name down. You had some military governors came in, and there was drama, right? And so they had to fight. And matter of fact, one of the first before Arthur St. Clair came in, I can't remember the name of his predecessor, but he was killed. He and many of his men were killed by the Native Americans. And then Arthur St. Clair came in, and I think he did better militarily. But when I say better, I mean as far as conquering, so not morally better. And so it was contentious with the Native Americans. A lot of the tribes never concluded that that Great Britain had the right to give their land over to this new United States, new initially Confederation, right? And then Republic after that, to these Americans. So at any rate, you have a guy who comes in named William Henry Harrison, and he just, everything about his beliefs and everything about his tactics just play into, by modern standards, of like tolerance and egalitarianism, and pluralism. He played a villain. He came in, he believed in before the term was coined, he believed in manifest destiny. He believed in that it was destined for the Anglo-Saxon American people to conquer the entire North American continent. And that it was in the fact that it was destined, right? That it was not only meant to be, that it was inevitable and going to happen, but that, it was the right thing to happen according to the creator himself. All right. He comes in, and there is a guy named Tenskwatawa. I won't ask you to spell that if you don't ask me. But Tenskwatawa was generically called the prophet. Okay. And this gentleman, the prophet, he began gaining a lot of followers, adherents. For one, he supposedly predicted a solar eclipse. He just did a lot of flashy things. And what he was telling the Native American people is that they need to put aside all of the baneful, harmful influences of the paleface, of the white man, and return to their indigenous roots. Okay. And I don't know why the video doesn't mention him. And so at any rate, as he gets a following, and he establishes his headquarters in a place that they call after him, Prophetstown. It began to be known as Prophetstown. I think the white American enemies sarcastically coined it that, and he let it stick. And so at any rate, William Henry Harrison began quoting himself in the newspapers, saying that if he finds the prophet, he was going to arrest him for treason against the American government, that this belonged to the American government, and he was fomenting, or provoking rebellious sentiment amongst the Native Americans. Well, if that was provocative, right? They were certain. William Henry Harrison was certainly threatened by the prophet Tenskwatawa's brother, and that is Tecumseh. Okay, Tecumseh was the military man, as his brother Tenskwatawa was like the medicine man and charismatic leader. And so Tecumseh, he began overtly going to different tribal areas and trying to form alliances, contingency alliances, right? And remember, we did this in World War I. Europe did. That he's not necessarily saying he's going to attack anybody. He's not saying even that he's going to war, but he's saying that if William Henry Harrison and his contingent of armed forces were to attack one of them, that all of the other tribes would have their back. Okay, the what if contingency. And so at any rate, that was enough to really, like I said, threaten William Henry Harrison. And also in his background, he was constantly trying to purchase land from the tribes and to try to push them westwardly. And then that goes to say, right, if he really believed that all of that soil now belonged to the United States, because they don't have it yet, you guys, but in the 1820s, not too long from here, they're going to have a specific case called the McIntosh case. And in that McIntosh case, they're going to state that the Native American tribes, all of them, are wards of the state. W-A-R-D. Remember, if you're a ward of the state, it's like an orphan child, right? It's someone who has been declared psychiatrically unable to sustain him or herself, right? Those are typically the demographics that they would declare wards of the state in English political tradition. So very condescending, very paternalistic. And so they contend that Native Americans are wards of the federal government. The federal government is to provide for and protect them, but the federal government is basically their father. Okay. So even though this was about 10 years preceding, give or take, the McIntosh case decision, you already had that attitude. Okay. So if, Mr. Harrison believed that they were wards of the state and all the soil belonged to the United States, then why was he trying to purchase it? And of course he might just say in his defense that, well, in their stubbornness, they're not accepting our sovereignty over it. And so I'm trying to avoid war. But even so, in trying to buy land from the native tribes with American federal money, he did it in a very pushy way. And some even contended that he extorted them. And remember, with extortion, you say, you do this or else, and you threaten them in some way. So he was not above, according to multiple sources, using extortion against these tribes. Okay. And so when Tecumseh had gone down south to meet with the Creek tribe, the video will say this as well. William Henry Harrison decided to move on Prophetstown, saying that he was going to arrest the two brothers, right? Tenskwatawa, the prophet, and his brother Tecumseh. And like I said, like the video suggests, a lot of people contend that he had good reason to know that Tecumseh was nowhere around, and he wanted it that way because they were more vulnerable without the military leader. And so when he began marching into Prophetstown, the Native Americans warned him not to come any further. And of course he did, and they attacked. So of course, in his words and his, communication with the press, he contended that the Native Americans attacked us first, right? That here we go. We had Pontiac, we had Little Turtle. Now we have a third rebellion with these two brothers here in the Ohio Valley. And the battle was called Tippecanoe. And at Tippecanoe, the Americans win. But as the video says very quickly, okay, is they said they found, when they were burying the Native American dead, killed in battle, that they found that many of them had used British muskets and new British muskets, as if they had been newly acquired. And remember, the British had not finished evacuating all the forts in that valley. And we do know, the video contends as well, that Tecumseh did meet with British military officials prior to all of this. So there you have one of your two reasons, right? Why we declare war against Great Britain and against Native American enemies, because Great Britain fomented rebellion amongst our tribes, stirred them up, provoked them into rebelling against us. All right. And by the way, they used the term, I think, a couple times in the video, but from just the couple books I've read on the War of 1812, the euphemism they used for the, because some tribes decided to stay neutral, some tribes decided to side with us. Many of those who fought on the British side against us, they put the red ochre on their weapons. And so we called them red sticks. So that was the popular term when you look at the primary sources at that time, the newspaper articles, the speeches by politicians, etc. They generically just kind of labeled them that way. The Red Sticks were the Native Americans who fought against us with Great Britain. Right? And then the second reason, I think they make pretty clear in the video. So I won't go as much into detail. I did the following, the preceding stuff, because I think you'll find when you watch the video, a lot of what I just mentioned was kind of left out as context. But I think they do a fine job with the second reason. And just note that from the time of, gosh, especially at this time, the Napoleonic Wars are being fought. You have notions, you have these conventions that take place in Europe, and they begin trying to not codify. They don't codify it yet. They're kind of far from doing that. But yet try to implement some of the notions of the Catholic Church on just war doctrine. And just, by just, I mean like morally upright, right? A just war. That goes all the way back at least to St. Augustine in the 300s with the Catholic Church over Europe. And the two categories they put it in, right, was for a war to be considered just, right? Especially if you're a good Christian, good Catholic. The reasons for which you fight the war ought to be just, and the manner by which you fight it ought to be just. Now, when I do World War II in my 17B class, we go more in depth into those, but I'm not going to now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to skip to the second category, okay? The manner by which war is to be fought. And one of the biggest principles in that second category of just war theory, okay, is discriminating between combatants and non-combatants, right? So you have permission to fight and shoot at and kill people who have from another nation who have formally declared war against you and are wearing uniforms and fighting you in battle. But civilians, you are to spare them. Okay? So that includes on the high seas. So like I said, they're not going to start codifying this just war doctrine into like later on, like the Geneva Accords, right? And the UN and all that. They start codifying it not too long from here in the Crimean War. What was that? Between Turkey and Russia, like in the 1850s. That's when they start codifying and, writing actual codes down. But like I said, they meet in London, in Berlin, in Paris, etc., time after time, and they make one thing after another clear. This is a certain right that is to be recognized internationally. Okay. Well, in one of those, they had met and they declared that private merchants, okay, who are trading, and also just private individuals traveling, okay, that they have a right to travel across the seas. And the first group, the merchants, even have a right to trade with one or more of the, quote, belligerent nations. Belligerent, a nation at war that has declared war. They put a list of exceptions. Okay. And so contraband literally means against the list. And you could guess what's on that list. Guns, gunpowder, any type of ammunition, something that directly helps one belligerent nation militarily get an edge over the other. They said only then have you stepped across your right as a neutral merchant. All right. Well, as you see in the video, that wasn't the case here. You're talking about textiles, food, other non-contraband materials that our merchants were trying to trade. All right. And England in particular, but also France, England and France began violating that right of ours. They would stop the ships. They would demand to come aboard to check for contraband. And then in many cases, even when they found that there was no contraband, they would still confiscate their goods as a punishment for their intention to go to the enemy's coast to trade with the enemy. Right. And also as a way of blockading the enemy. They wanted to starve their enemy. They wanted to keep clothing, food, etc., from getting to their enemy. So there was also just a pragmatic, intention behind it. And remember, the French Revolution, when they were about to kill Louis XVI, the Jacobins of the French Revolution, remember Austria and Prussia of Germany and England intervened to try to save his life. And then things spiraled out of control after that. Then Napoleon takes control of the quote French Revolution. He makes the Napoleonic Code and says what seems a little bit like an oxymoron. I'm going to be the autocratic emperor, but yet I'm going to impose a very enlightened Napoleonic Code over the territories that we defeat. And they felt like it was us against the world, right? The French Revolutionary France. So at any rate, they're fighting Napoleon, the Austrians, the Prussians, the Russians, when they decide, right, when Napoleon decides to invade Russia, and of course the English. And despite all those teams against one, France did really well on the battlefield for a while. So at any rate, that's what's going on as the bigger picture. When you see the instances of what the English were doing to our merchants and others, okay? And yeah, you see the Leopard Chesapeake incident that will be on the video. And you'll see the English come aboard, and the Americans were not cooperative, claiming their right as a neutral country to be left alone. And the British fired on them and killed some of the Americans aboard. And it went to the press, and the Americans were furious over the treatment of them in the Atlantic Ocean. Okay. And then also they say real briefly that you have a new breed of congressmen at this time. All right. And I don't know how much to put into this, but for one, right, a lot of the congressmen it might be the youngest Congress we've ever had, in their 30s and 40s. Okay. So some people think just that fact was significant in and of itself. The fact that these men literally had more testosterone, and they were not going to abide any type of slight to our dignity and our image as a country. All right. And then also another guy says in the video that a lot of a lot of people were for this war so they could get land. And you could easily guess what they mean by that is we've had a terrible tradition of fighting Native Americans and then dispossessing them at the end of the war as punishment for having the audacity to fight against us. So they're wanting Native American lands. And there's evidence for some of that for sure. All right. And then you have Andrew Jackson. And Andrew Jackson prided himself on being a man of the people. All right. We're going to see when we get to the assignment on him that he came from very humble origins. And by the time he became president, that was something to be proud of. All right. But he acted as if the will of the people was almost mystically correct. Right? That so that he like I don't think that's an exaggeration from what I've read. That he felt that if you put something in the hands, any issue to like a referendum, let's say, right? Like in November was just a popular vote. Every citizen gets to vote, right? On an issue. There's evidence that he contended that they would almost never get it wrong. That when you go to the majority of people and you go to the will of the people, it'll be the right thing. And of course, I will beg to differ in my argumentative assignment when we get to it. Okay, on his presidency. But right now he's a younger man. And so there was something called, and I haven't read the specifics of it, but as soon as the war broke out with Tippecanoe, right? Up there in Indiana, I think it was. The Creek, they decided to side with Tecumseh and his coalition, right? And so, the war conch was passed. That was a Native American tradition, whereby, that it lets people know, hey, your ally is under attack. You're obligated to go to war with them, right? So the war conch is passed down south, and the Creek began attacking American settlers. Because you got to remember, a lot of American settlers were squatters. They may have had the blessing of the governments from the East Coast, but they never got the permission from the Native American tribes. And a lot of the people that made it through the Cumberland Gap of the Appalachian Mountains into Tennessee and Kentucky, that was like the West of that time, were Scots-Irish. And as we get to on Jackson's assignment, they had a reputation for being very poor, but very ambitious and possibly ruthless and wanting to make riches for themselves. And they quickly developed a very strong antagonism right back to the Native Americans who resented them for encroaching on their lands. Supposedly, the Scots-Irish were known as the Long Knives to the Cherokee and other tribes because of their Bowie knife and their tendency to use it. So there was an incident called the Duck Creek Massacre, like the quacking duck. And the Creek massacred white American civilians. And boy, did that become a rallying cry in the South. And Andrew Jackson took it upon himself, saying that the Indians need to be punished. Then as they were fighting, there was one more famous massacre that the natives engaged in, and that was Fort Mims, M-I-M-S. And the white Americans who made it to the fort, they were told and made to understand and assume that they were safe inside the fort. Many of them were unarmed, as they wanted to stay out of this war. And the Native Americans made it into the fort, and they slaughtered the people, including women and children. So between those two massacres, right, there was an outcry to get the Red Sticks, in particular, the Creek. Okay. So Andrew Jackson makes his name known at this time with his fighting. And so at any rate, you'll see in the video about New Orleans and his ragtag army, very, very diverse army. And it was kind of like, not Culp's Hill, what do they call it? Oh, shoot. It's eluding me. I'm sorry. It's anyway, where they ensconced themselves very well defensively, and the English just kind of stupidly kept coming shoulder to shoulder, approaching them, and they just mowed them down one line after another. And so they had a very strong tactical advantage, and it really increased American patriotism and morale, the Battle of New Orleans. But also, what we did that was supposedly ruthless was a battle called Horseshoe Bend. Okay, Horseshoe Bend. And we got the help of other native tribes, particularly Cherokee. And we ambushed the creek and surrounded them. And as they tried to swim across a river, they either drowned or were shot and killed, or worse, with hacked almost to a man. I don't remember the numbers of casualties, but it was high. So Horseshoe Bend was a massacre of the Creek during this war. Another thing of note, and it kind of goes over it in the video, is the irony, right? Is England was best known for its navy, right? And we were proud of the fact that we got England to quit in the War for Independence with our army. But a lot of the upsets that we received militarily, look at like the Battle of Baltimore. We were routed on land time and again. And we had some of our biggest, ironically, victories on the water. So that was quite a surprise. And you'll see, for instance, Oliver Hazard Perry, a young man who he saw that his ship was going down. He jumped into a little boat with some men, approached the British ship that had destroyed his, somehow scaled into the ship and fought and took over the British ship. Another ship behind it, of British nationality, had no idea what was going on, and so kind of stood there as a lame duck, and he used his commandeered British ship to just plow right into the port side of its ally, and the ally had no idea what was going on. And so things like that, we really surprised the world on the water. Going back to the Battle of Baltimore, they said our boys were really bad in that battle to flee, literally flee for their lives and leave their positions on the battlefield. And the British easily came into DC, and supposedly the dinner plates were still warm on the table in the White House, and some of them sat down and ate them, the British, and they took their time before they burnt our White House to the ground. And you have to remember also, that was also a retaliation to us for burning down the Capitol building in Quebec, Canada. Speaking of Canada, I think they mentioned the two reasons, but they just don't satisfy me. But they are what they are in the sources. Is for one, is there was a contingent of Americans who really believed that Canada did not have the backbone to defy England and to break off from Great Britain, and that so that if we went into Canada, they would accept us with open arms as their liberators, because of course they still had British rulers, especially military rulers there. All right. And then another contingent, another argument is more cynical, right? And that is that we, just like we wanted Native American land, we said, hey, all bets are off. You know, we're fighting Great Britain. That means we're fighting Great Britain everywhere the British control and are. And so let's go try to get some land in Canada. So some think it was an effort at imperialism, and some think it was a naive crusade to liberate Canada. And you'll see in the video, and as you could guess, the fact that Canada is part of Great Britain right now, that it failed miserably. Okay, and you'll see in the video. But we were disgusted several times in that attempt. And our guys, in disgust, rather vindictively, burnt down a Capitol building in Quebec. So that also had a lot to do with the British burning down our White House. But at any rate, as the video says, the British considered Napoleon and Europe bigger fish to fry than America. We were never their primary concern all the way over here. Now, granted, they definitely did not want to lose Canada. But at any rate, so supposedly it was almost arrogant indifference, as well as wanting to just get everything done as efficiently as possible. I read it once, it was a long time ago, like the diplomatic, the peace treaty, and those who went and so forth. But we were fortunate in that, because, you know, in some ways you could say that, especially on land, that the British, you know, kind of beat us. But they got they extracted from the peace treaty a term, and I can only say part of it. It's is it status quo antebellum? I think that they're going to keep land and whoever owns what land as was before the war. Antebellum is before the war. So hence, we didn't gain 1 inch of ground from England, but England didn't gain 1 inch of ground from us. We went back to the same as before the outbreak of the war. However, we did gain ground from the Red Sticks, as you could easily guess. We have a history of being very vindictive toward Native American tribes after we fight them. All right, so are there any questions or comments? Yes, Clara.
Is this William Henry Harrison? Is he also the guy who becomes like a president, or is that a different guy?
That's the same guy. Yep, he became our 9th president. Have you guys heard of the Prophet's Curse? Now, this has gone on strongly enough that my high school teacher shared this with us. And I had a lot of respect for him. He'd gone to Berkeley, etc. But I can't prove it. All right. But it's a great story. It's an anecdote. So I'm gonna give it to you anyway, okay? But let that be my my precursor to this, is that it may not be true. Okay. But the story goes is that the prophet Tenskwatawa said that white man, alluding to William Henry Harrison, when he was the military governor and fighting with them, right, trying to arrest him in the Ohio Valley, said he is going to become the leader of his great white nation. He says, but I've ensured that he will not survive his tenure. And here's where it gets spooky, is he says, and I've also ensured that it was a Native American term for 10 years, for a decade. And he said, in every 2 decades, that his predecessors too will die in office. I don't know. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know. But you think about it. He was elected in 1840. His opposition said, don't vote for Harrison. He's so old that he won't live through the entire term. And so, to prove a point of his virility and youthfulness, he went against his advisors, and he gave his inaugural speech in the midst of a snowstorm. Well, supposedly he got pneumonia and died. Wasn't a president very long at all. Okay. Fast forward 20 years. We all know what happened to Abraham Lincoln. Fast forward to 1880, Garfield, right? And the story with Garfield is that a mentally deranged man came to his office and asked him if he would put him in his cabinet. And Garfield supposedly laughed at him. And he found him on a train station and shot and killed him. Fast forward 20 years to 1900, and William McKinley was at a fair in Buffalo, New York, and shaking hands with people. And a guy named Kolgovitz, who was a Polish immigrant, had been laid off from his job, had gone to an anarchist meeting where they were told that what needs to happen is for the government to collapse and the rich, everything was ruled by the rich, and the answer was killing the rulers and so forth. So as he shook his hand, he shot him twice, and he died from it. You fast forward 20 years to I got his face in my head. Oh shoot. Oh my goodness, I can't believe his name is eluding me right now. The 1920s. He absolutely lived the epitome. He demonstrated in his public image the epitome of the Roaring 20s. He had lots of scandals, including affairs on his wife, and he was healthy as can be. It looked it anyway when he took office. And they took bribes for prohibition, all kinds of stuff, right? But when all these scandals started coming up in 23, about 3 years into his 4-year term, he was taking a trip up to Seattle, and he ate bad fish, and he already was getting the beginnings of congestive heart failure. Warren G. Harding, and I couldn't tell you that it was natural causes, they say, but it might have been a heart attack. But at any rate, he died. And then you go to 1940, and FDR died of natural causes, his fourth term as president through the New Deal and World War II, right? And then 1960, you know what happened with Kennedy. In 1980, Ronald Reagan was shot, and one of his bodyguards was paralyzed. And they said that in removing the bullet surgically, that he had a close call. And so they said that he broke the curse. He broke the prophet's curse. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting. However true it may or may not be.
Wow, that's really interesting.
It
It's
is,
cool.
huh? Yeah, it is. It's fascinating. I mean, even without that curse, it's crazy that in 20-year increments, how our presidents have died in office. Just that alone is strange. Jacob, I didn't have your name.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, good to have you.
Thanks.
All right, and so I think that from what I've said, hopefully that will kind of fill the holes in that the video leaves, and some of it you'll find it to be redundant, that both the video and I mentioned. All right, and so good luck
Well,
with
it's going to
this.
be a fun one.
What's that, Jacob?
This is going to be a fun one. We get to watch a video.
Oh, good, good. I'm glad. I know. I thought if anything, at least it's different. It's a little break from the norm, right?
Yeah.
Good. Well, that makes me happy. That makes me feel better, because I would have I had a mentor who convinced me of doing the format that I do, and saying that, you know, like getting people to analyze and synthesize stuff and evaluate it, that those are the higher levels of thinking, rather than just listening to something or watching something and then just regurgitating data. And so my mentor would not be proud of this assignment. And that's why I only did it once. But I love that some of you, Jacob, enjoy watching documentaries, because they can be very, very interesting and very, very informative.
Especially for somebody like me who wants to be a history major. I don't know. Maybe
There you go.
Maybe for me, it's very enthusiastic.
No, that's great, Jacob.
Yeah.
That's really good. And just to think, I already liked you before I knew that. It makes history nerd teachers so happy when they hear someone is going to be a history major.
Yeah. Oh yeah, really?
You know, as if we have anything to do with it, but we like to think we're like, right on. So that's great. No, that's great. So anybody else? Anybody have any concluding comments or questions before I let you go and do this video? Remember, you have until not this Sunday, but the following Sunday. But remember that I think it'll end up being test 2, that in order to stay on track, we're still going to have the following Sunday the test 2 due. So you'll, just like last time I messed up, I want to give you extra time for waiting so long to post it, but I need you to utilize your time well, so that you do 2 things within the same given date. Okay?
Sure.
Good.
Can I share something?
Yeah.
The street that I live on is called McKinley. And
Oh, wow.
Supposedly, President McKinley did a train, he traveled across the United States in a train back in 1900 or something like that. And he made a pit stop in my little town. He didn't stay but for a few hours. And then he went on, he continued on his way up towards Sacramento. and then eventually back to Washington, and that's why they named the street McKinley.
Wow. I did not know that.
Yeah, in Lathrop, here in Lathrop.
That's amazing.
Yeah, back at the old railroad station used to be a whistle stop, but
Sure.
not anymore. Yeah, so that's what they say. So I don't know.
No, I bet it's true. I bet
Yeah, it
it's
is. I
true.
think so. Yeah, they
I
stayed here
can,
for a few hours and took off.
yeah, I continue to hear of big, like oftentimes presidents, big politicians and celebrities, and they're however brief, stops in small towns of the Central Valley of California,
Mhm.
things like that. It's amazing. It's very interesting.
So I just thought I'd share that because it's kind of cool to know.
That is cool. That is. Yeah, I
I
definitely did not know that.
I got some other thing I'd share you, but I gotta research it a little better. It's also about something here in Lathrop, right across the street from my house on the other side of the tracks is another historical thing. But I'll share it with you on our next
Sure.
video call because I gotta research it exactly what it was.
You got it. I look forward to it.
I'll share with all of you too.
Right on. Thank you, Jacob. So Clara, did you
Right.
raise your hand?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if we need the Constitution assignment before we take the test, or are we able to, or like, should we take the test before that?
Oh gosh. I've got some decisions that need to be made quickly. Shoot. Yeah, let me see. All right, the first thing I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to see if I can possibly push our schedule back 1 week. That's my first preference, right? Because technically I know like at least in my other school, some instructors get through Reconstruction and some don't. And so if it makes your guys' experience less stressful, I may just drop Reconstruction at the end, although I love that subject, and just have you do end at the Civil War. And yeah, I tell you what, let me look at everything, and then I will tell everybody via an announcement, okay? Because I'm sorry, I don't want to make a rash decision right now and then look at everything, think everything through, and then change my mind from what I told you. Okay?
What exactly are we talking about?
I did not put in the Constitution assignment. And
Oh,
when you look
okay.
at the description of this class, it stated that we are to cover the Constitution.
Oh,
And so
sure then.
I feel like that's an imperative. We've got to do it.
Yeah.
And so I either just can push everything back 1 week and have you not do the final assignment on Reconstruction, because often what happens is in your 17B, they begin with Reconstruction. That's why some instructors feel free not to do Reconstruction in 17A, because they almost count on the fact that their counterparts teaching 17B will cover it for their kids when they take it.
Oh, okay.
So that's presently what I want to do, just so that I don't compress things, with your time. But one way or another, we're definitely going to do the Constitution. That we just have to. And I hope you find it interesting. It's a different type of assignment as well. It's not argumentative.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yep.
So, yeah. All right. Yeah, shoot. Or if it's not too much, what I could even do is combine, because I think my causes of the Civil War, I don't know, I might be able to combine the Civil War and Reconstruction. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what I can do. All right. So I'm sorry, you guys, again.
Oh, no, that's fine.
But I hope you guys enjoy this video. Feel free. I mean, obviously, of course I'd love just you enjoying it and watching it all the way through, but it's pretty long. Feel free to, just do what you need to do. Look for the answers. Once you feel good about your answers, stop the video, do whatever but just make sure that you answer the questions pretty adequately. And
Right, right.
that's good enough for me.
Right. If you, I don't know about anyone else, but if you want, if it was just me, I mean, if you wanted to just give me a little more work than, than usual, I'll still do it. I'm not gonna sit here and complain.
Well, thank you. Well, I'm gonna
How
at
about the
least make,
reconstruction?
I might even, I'm just thinking out loud, but I could even post it early and have it due the last day of class and just maybe even make the reconstruction assignment extra credit or something of that sort.
As long as we get it all in, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's just a matter of squeezing everything in time. Time is
Mhm.
our big issue.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, just let us know. For me, it's whatever you decide is fine.
Well, thank you.
Mhm.
All right. And so, yeah, with that, you guys, that's about it. That's about all I was wanting to share. I feel like the video will do the rest.
It's gonna be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Good. That makes me happy. It really does. Yeah, I'm a history nerd. I enjoyed it. I thought it was interesting.
It's on the War of 1812.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll be looking
Yeah.
forward to that.
PBS on the War of 1812.
All right. I'm gonna watch it.
All right. All right. You guys hang in there, okay?
Thanks, teacher.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
All right. Take care. See you next time. I'll text you if I have
Thank
any
you.
questions.
You got it. Thank you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.